Buying a home in 2026 feels like standing at a crossroads, where every direction seems to come with a warning sign. Some headlines are telling buyers to wait, to stay patient, to expect prices to fall or rates to finally come down. Other voices are saying the opposite, that waiting could cost you, that today's hesitation may turn into tomorrow's regret. For anyone thinking about buying a home, the noise is overwhelming, and the lack of clarity has made what used to be a straightforward life decision feel like a financial gamble. For years, buying a home followed a familiar pattern. Prices generally rose over time, mortgage rates stayed relatively manageable, and buyers believed that even if they stretched a little, they would eventually grow into their payments. That confidence was shaken starting in 2022 when mortgage rates surged at a pace few people had ever experienced. Suddenly, monthly payments jumped by hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars. Buyers pulled back. Sellers hesitated. The housing market slowed, not because people stopped wanting homes, but because the math stopped making sense. Now, as we approach 2026, the market feels different again. It is no longer red hot, but it also hasn't collapsed. Prices in many areas have flattened rather than fallen. Inventory is slowly rebuilding, but it is still far below historical norms. Mortgage rates remain elevated compared to the ultra-low levels of the late 2000s, yet they appear more stable than they were during the peak of volatility. This combination has left buyers asking a critical question. Is 2026 a mistake to enter the market, or could it quietly become one of the smarter windows to buy? What makes this moment so difficult is that the housing market is no longer moving in one clear direction nationwide. Some regions are seeing renewed competition, while others are offering price reductions and seller concessions. Luxury markets are behaving differently than entry-level housing. First-time buyers face a different set of trade-offs than move-up buyers or investors. In other words, the old one-size-fits-all advice no longer applies, and that's exactly why so many people feel stuck. This video isn't about pushing anyone to buy or telling you to sit on the sidelines. Instead, it's about understanding the forces shaping the housing market in 2026 and what they realistically mean for buyers. When you strip away the fear-driven headlines and the overly optimistic sales pitches, what remains is a market that is rebalancing, slowly and unevenly, after one of the most extreme periods in housing history. To answer whether buying a home in 2026 might actually be a smart move, we first need to understand how we got here. The decisions buyers face today didn't appear overnight. They are the result of nearly a decade of rising prices, a historic surge in home equity, and a sudden shift in borrowing costs that fundamentally changed affordability. Without that context, it's easy to misread the current moment and make decisions based on emotion rather than reality. So before we talk about mortgage rates, inventory, or whether prices will rise or fall, we need to rewind. We need to look at how the housing market evolved from 2016 through the mid-2000s, and why those years created both the challenges and the opportunities buyers see today. Only then can we realistically judge whether 2026 is a year to avoid, or a year that quietly rewards buyers who understand the bigger picture. To understand why buying a home in 2026 feels so complicated, you have to go back to the mid-2000s when the foundation for today's market was quietly being laid. In 2016, the housing market was still recovering from the aftermath of the great financial crisis. Lending standards were tighter, inventory was limited, and new home construction had not fully rebounded. At the time, prices were rising, but few people believed they were entering an unsustainable boom. In fact, many buyers felt cautious, unsure whether home values would continue to grow or stall out again. As the years passed, That caution slowly turned into confidence. Between 2016 and 2019, home prices increased steadily across much of the country. Mortgage rates remained relatively low by historical standards, which kept monthly payments manageable even as prices climbed. Buyers adjusted to higher price tags because financing costs made the numbers work. Homeownership once again felt like a reliable long-term investment, and demand continued to build. Then came the early 2000s, which completely reshaped the housing market in ways few could have predicted. When mortgage rates dropped to historic lows, the cost of borrowing fell dramatically. Monthly payments shrank, even as prices rose. This created a surge in buyer demand that collided with already limited inventory. Homes sold faster. Multiple offer situations became normal. Buyers waived contingencies and stretched their budgets just to compete. What might have looked risky in another era felt justified because interest rates made payments unusually affordable. During this period, home equity exploded. Homeowners saw the value of their properties rise at a pace rarely seen before. This wealth effect reinforced the belief that buying a home, even at a high price, was still a smart move. Renters felt pressure to buy before being priced out entirely. Investors entered the market, drawn by low borrowing costs and rising rents. The idea that prices could meaningfully fall began to fade from the collective mindset. But this environment was built on one critical assumption: that low mortgage rates would last. When inflation surged and interest rates rose rapidly starting in 2022, that assumption collapsed almost overnight. The same home that felt affordable at a 3% mortgage rate suddenly became unreachable at 6 or 7%. Monthly payments jumped far faster than incomes. Buyers didn't disappear because they lost interest in owning homes. They stepped back because affordability broke. This shift didn't immediately cause prices to crash. Instead, it froze the market. Many homeowners who had locked in low mortgage rates chose not to sell, unwilling to give up their favorable financing. Inventory stayed tight, even as buyer demand weakened. Sellers resisted lowering prices, hoping conditions would improve. Transactions slowed, but values in many areas simply plateaued rather than falling sharply. By 2024 and 2025, the housing market had entered an unusual phase. It was neither booming nor collapsing. Prices in some regions declined modestly, while others held steady or even continued to rise. Affordability remained strained, yet wage growth and demographic demand prevented a full-scale correction. The result was a market defined by imbalance. Too few homes for sale, buyers wary of high payments, and sellers hesitant to adjust expectations. This is the environment buyers carry with them into 2026. Years of rapid appreciation created a sense that homes are permanently expensive, while the rate shock taught buyers how fragile affordability can be. Many people now fear buying at the wrong time, worried they might overpay or lock themselves into a payment they regret. At the same time, the memory of missed opportunities weighs heavily on those who waited during the low-rate era and watched prices move further out of reach. What matters most about this history is not just how prices and rates moved, but how buyer psychology changed along the way. The housing market of 2026 is shaped by caution, not euphoria. Buyers are more analytical. They ask tougher questions. They compare renting versus buying more carefully. This shift in mindset is crucial because it affects how demand behaves, even if conditions improve. Understanding how we arrived here helps explain why 2026 cannot be judged by the standards of past cycles. It is not a repeat of the post-crisis recovery, nor is it a continuation of the pandemic-era boom. It is something in between, a transitional phase where the market slowly recalibrates after years of extremes. Whether that recalibration creates opportunity depends on how mortgage rates, inventory, and affordability evolve next. That brings us to the forces buyers care about most today. Mortgage rates, monthly payments, and the availability of homes will ultimately determine whether buying in 2026 feels reasonable or risky. To answer the question of whether 2026 could quietly be a smart time to buy, we now need to look closely at what current data is signaling about borrowing costs and affordability, and why even small shifts can make a meaningful difference for buyers on the sidelines. As buyers look ahead to 2026, mortgage rates sit at the center of almost every conversation. For many people, the question is not whether rates will return to the historic lows of the past decade, but whether they will finally move low enough to make monthly payments feel manageable again. The reality is that most forecasts no longer assume a dramatic collapse in rates. Instead, they point toward gradual stabilization, with modest declines that may not grab headlines but can still meaningfully change affordability. What's important to understand is that housing affordability doesn't require rates to fall back to 3%. Even a reduction of half a percentage point or one full point can significantly lower monthly payments, especially when combined with slower price growth or small price corrections. For buyers who have been sitting on the sidelines, waiting for a perfect moment, this is a critical shift. The market does not need a dramatic rate event to reopen opportunity. It needs consistency and predictability, and that is what 2026 may begin to offer. At the same time, affordability in 2026 is influenced by more than just mortgage rates. After years of rapid home price appreciation, price growth has cooled in many areas. This doesn't always mean prices are falling sharply, but it does mean buyers are no longer chasing homes that increase in value month after month. Sellers are becoming more realistic, and price reductions are more common than they were during the height of the boom. For buyers, this changes the tone of the transaction. Negotiation returns. Patience becomes a strategy rather than a liability. Inventory plays a major role here. One of the defining challenges of the housing market over the past decade has been the chronic shortage of homes for sale. New construction never fully caught up after the last housing downturn, and the surge in demand during the low-rate era drained what little supply existed. Even as buyer demand cooled with higher rates, inventory remained constrained because homeowners with low mortgage rates chose not to sell. In 2026, that dynamic begins to loosen, even if slowly. Life events still happen. People move for jobs, family changes, or financial reasons. Over time, more homes come to market, not in a flood, but in a steady increase that improves buyer choice. New construction also adds supply in certain regions, particularly in areas where builders can respond more quickly to demand. This doesn't solve the housing shortage overnight, but it does shift the balance away from extreme scarcity. For buyers, rising inventory matters because it reduces pressure. When there are more homes to choose from, buyers can take time to evaluate neighborhoods, compare prices, and negotiate terms. This environment favors preparation over speed. Buyers who are pre-approved, financially stable, and patient may find themselves in a stronger position than they would have been just a few years earlier. Another subtle but important factor in 2026 is the return of seller concessions. During the hottest years of the market, buyers rarely asked for help with closing costs, repairs, or rate buydowns. In a more balanced market, these tools reappear. Sellers looking to move are often willing to offer concessions to make deals work, especially if it means avoiding further price reductions. For buyers, this can effectively lower the cost of ownership even if the purchase price remains similar. Affordability is also shaped by income growth and household stability. While wages have not kept pace with home prices over the long term, recent years have seen income gains that partially offset higher borrowing costs. For some buyers, this creates a narrow but meaningful window where buying becomes feasible again, not because homes are cheap, but because their personal finances are stronger. The key takeaway for 2026 is that conditions do not need to be perfect to be favorable. A market defined by moderate rates, slowly improving inventory, and more flexible sellers can create opportunities that were simply unavailable during the peak frenzy. Buyers who understand this may realize that waiting for a dramatic crash or a return to ultra-low rates could mean missing a period where leverage quietly shifts back in their favor. However, none of this means that 2026 is automatically the right time for everyone. Affordability remains a real challenge, and regional differences are significant. Some markets will remain competitive, while others may soften further. That's why the final question isn't just whether the market improves, but who actually benefits from these conditions. To answer that, we need to look at different types of buyers and how 2026 affects each of them differently. First-time buyers, move-up buyers, investors, and luxury buyers all face unique trade-offs. Understanding those distinctions is essential to deciding whether buying in 2026 is a smart move or a risk best avoided. Section 4. Who should buy, who should wait, risks, and final verdict start. By the time buyers reach 2026, the most important realization is that there is no universal answer to whether it is the right time to buy. The market no longer rewards broad assumptions. Instead, it rewards alignment between personal circumstances and market conditions. For some buyers, 2026 may quietly offer one of the most reasonable entry points they have seen in years. For others, waiting may still be the smarter choice. For first-time buyers, 2026 presents a mixed but improving picture. Affordability remains challenging, especially in high-cost metros, but the intensity of competition has eased compared to the peak years. Buyers are less likely to face bidding wars, waived contingencies, or rushed decisions. This allows first-time buyers to focus on fundamentals: stable employment, manageable monthly payments, and long-term plans. For those who can secure a home without stretching their budget to the breaking point, buying in 2026 may offer something that was absent just a few years earlier: breathing room. Move-up buyers face a different equation. Many are sitting on substantial home equity built during the rapid appreciation years. The challenge for them is not price alone, but the mortgage rate gap between their current loan and a new one. In 2026, this group must weigh lifestyle needs against financial trade-offs. For those who truly need more space or a different location, the market may offer better negotiating power and more options than in recent years. For those who simply want to upgrade, patience may still be valuable. Investors approach 2026 with heightened caution. Rising borrowing costs and slower price appreciation mean that speculative buying is far less attractive than it once was. Cash flow matters more. Rental demand remains strong in many areas, but margins are thinner, and assumptions must be conservative. For disciplined investors focused on long-term fundamentals rather than quick appreciation, selective opportunities may exist. For those relying on rapid price gains, 2026 is far less forgiving. Luxury buyers operate almost in a separate market altogether. Higher-end homes are more sensitive to economic uncertainty and financial market conditions. In 2026, luxury segments may continue to see softness in certain regions, creating negotiating opportunities for buyers with strong financial positions. However, these opportunities are uneven and highly localized. Patience and market knowledge matter more than timing headlines. No discussion of buying in 2026 would be complete without acknowledging the risks. Mortgage rates could remain higher for longer than expected. Economic slowdowns could affect job security. Some markets may see further price declines, particularly where supply has outpaced demand. Buyers who enter the market without financial buffers or long-term plans expose themselves to unnecessary stress. This is not a market that rewards overextension. At the same time, the risk of perpetual waiting deserves equal attention. Many buyers have already delayed purchasing for years, hoping for a perfect alignment of low prices and low rates. History suggests that such moments are rare and often recognized only in hindsight. Waiting indefinitely can mean rising rents, lost equity growth, and missed stability. In 2026, the cost of waiting may not be obvious, but it is real. The balanced truth is this: buying a home in 2026 is less about predicting the market and more about understanding yourself. Buyers who prioritize long-term stability, realistic budgets, and flexibility are better positioned than those chasing short-term gains or ideal conditions. The market is no longer pushing buyers forward through fear of missing out. Instead, it invites careful decision-making. So, is buying a home in 2026 maybe the best move? For some, yes. Not because it is easy, cheap, or guaranteed, but because it offers a calmer environment where thoughtful buyers can act without panic. For others, the best move may still be patience, preparation, and financial strengthening. What matters most is clarity. Clarity about your finances, clarity about your timeline, and clarity about what you are truly buying into. Homes are not just assets. They are places to live, grow, and build stability. When viewed through that lens, 2026 may not be perfect, but it may finally be reasonable. If you've made it this far, you're already ahead of most people. Most buyers never slow down enough to really understand the market they're stepping into. They react to headlines, opinions, and fear, instead of taking the time to look at the bigger picture. That's why the housing market feels so confusing right now. It's not because the answers don't exist, but because they're rarely explained without hype or panic. Buying a home in 2026 isn't about trying to outsmart the market or perfectly time the next move. It's about being informed, realistic, and honest with yourself about what you need and what you can afford. Some people will look back at this period and realize it gave them a chance to buy with less competition, more flexibility, and clearer thinking. Others may realize they waited too long, expecting conditions that never fully arrived. Now, if this video helped you understand the market a little better, go ahead and hit the like button. It really helps the channel reach more people who are trying to make smart housing decisions. And if you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss future videos. Also, tap the notification bell so you're alerted when new videos go live. The housing market moves fast, and staying informed can make a real difference when you're making big decisions like buying a home. If you're actively thinking about buying, drop a comment below and share what market you're watching or what's holding you back. And if you know someone who's been on the fence about buying, feel free to share this video with them. The right information at the right time can change everything. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.